Hi, I'm Dallas Brown, host of our Chopra-centered lifestyle conversations about inspiration, health, purpose, and spirituality. Today, I am so excited to welcome Liz Gilbert. Liz Gilbert is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of Eat.Pray.Love and several other internationally best-selling books of fiction and nonfiction. Gilbert began her career writing for Harper's Bazaar, Spin, the New York Times Magazine, and GQ, and was a 3-time finalist for the National Magazine Award. Her story collection, Pilgrims, was a finalist for the PEN/Hemingway Award. The Last American Man was a finalist for both the National Book Award and the National Book Critics Circle Award. Her latest novel, The Signature of All Things, was named the Best Book of 2013 by the New York Times, O Magazine, The Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and the New Yorker. This May, Liz will join Deepak, Joan Borisenko, and other master educators at the Chopra Center for Spiritual Solutions for Women, our very first workshop just for women who wish to live extraordinary lives. Today, Liz is joining us to talk about women, creativity, and moving past fear, which is also the topic of her new book, Big Magic, coming out this September. Hi, Liz. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Now, we're all so excited about the recent announcement of your new book, Big Magic, which is coming out in September. Now, this is a book about your creative process and journey.
It is, although it's, I have to say, it's the first book I've ever written that I think I can, without hesitation, describe as a self-help book. It's less of a personal memoir, although it is about my own process in a way, and it's more just a response to years, even decades of questions that I've had from people about their creativity, and just years of listening to people say that they want to live more expanded, imaginative, sparkling, inventive lives, but they can't seem to get past, generally speaking, they can't seem to get past their own fears, and all the different ways that those fears show up, and all the different ways that we can try to face them.
Now, that seems to be so true, particularly for women. On an interview with Oprah on Super Soul Sunday, you said that for some reason there seem to be huge numbers of women who never got the memo that their lives belong to them. Why do you think that is?
Millennia of world history.
The short answer.
Yeah, the short answer is like tens of thousands of years of women's lives not belonging to them. Like their bodies not belonging to them, their identities not belonging to them, their names not belonging to them, their money not belonging to them. This is something that has been happening for a really long time, and in fact only recently stopped happening. And I think we have to pause sometimes and remember how absolutely new it is to imagine a world where every part of a woman's aspect is in her own possession. That's just something that never occurred before. And so I think we haven't quite gotten used to it yet. Sometimes even those of us who consider ourselves very, very liberated and very independent, we're still dealing with the drag of thousands of years of history that said otherwise. And so I'm constantly trying to remind people, like, this is new, and we don't, as women, have tens of thousands of years of role models to look back on of women who lived completely autonomous lives, because for the most part they didn't exist, with a rare exception. And so we're really building this as we go. And so of course we're sometimes a bit confused and sometimes a bit uncertain, and sometimes, not standing in our full confidence. But I think we're, we have the best chance of any women who have ever lived. And so I think the hour calls for a bit of boldness.
Yes. Well, I love that too, because it's such a reason to be a little bit more gentle with ourselves and not to hold ourselves up to these sometimes very difficult standards, and this whole concept of having it all, and we're supposed to be these super women, and in fact this is kind of new territory that we're getting to figure out here.
Yeah, it's true. And I always say, like, I look at my grandmother's life, for instance. It doesn't look a thing like my life. Whereas the men in my family can look at their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers, and it kind of like there's a continuity there, you know. And my grandmother and I, as much as we love each other, we might as well be different species, because the lives that we lived were so separate from each other. And so I can learn from her things like dignity and grace, but I can't sort of look at her life and pattern mine after hers. And so I have to look to my sisters and to my neighbors and to my peers and to my colleagues, and they're all looking around too. You know, we're all like, how are you doing this? How are you doing this? And of course, you know, that comes with a little bit of insecurity, and sometimes, unfortunately, it comes, you know, that insecurity expresses itself as competition, you know, there can be a sort of bitterness aspect in it. But I do think that we should all give ourselves a break for possibly not always knowing exactly how to manage this. That said, I wouldn't trade it for any other time. You know, it's still the best game in town.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Eat.Pray.Love was obviously this huge international bestseller, and I've watched interviews and talks with you where you seem to even be quite taken and surprised with its success. And that book resonated with, you know, hundreds of thousands of women all over the world, and it was almost this JFK or 9/11 type moment where I think we all, my friends and I remember exactly where I was when I read that book and exactly what was going on in my life, and it really just spoke to something very deep inside of me, obviously spoke to something very deep inside of a lot of women, and you know, it seemed that type of story had not been told yet. Do you think that sense of relatability is why the book resonated so strongly?
You know, I honestly don't know. You know, and I think kind of the definition of a phenomenon is that there isn't an explanation. You know, and I think that the book was a phenomenon, and I'm so comfortable with mystery. I spend so much of my life sort of fascinated and entranced by mystery, and I'm always so willing to surrender to it and to just be like, oh, you know, I love this universe. I have no idea what it's about, but I like being here. You know, like you know, and I feel like the older I get, the more humbled I am by just not understanding how things work or why people make the choices they do. Just feeling kind of dazzled by by being here at all. All I know is that I wrote the book I needed to write in order to write myself through something that was making me feel incredibly isolated, which was my personal story, a story of having gotten married really young and followed all the right steps and did everything I was supposed to have done, and then ended up terribly, terribly depressed, like in a kind of early death, you know, and had to make a choice. Do I keep this thing that looks good from the outside but is making me feel like a corpse, or do I break this mold that I'm on and go find out what makes me really happy, even though it's a very painful thing to do, and even though I feel very guilty about doing it? And I guess that must have just spoken to more women than I ever could have imagined, who may have found themselves in similar situations.
Well, and as a result of that book and your stance that you've taken for your own life, you've really become this inspiration and this teacher, and you've created this amazing global community of women who, you know, instead of competing with one another, are really coming together to support each other.
Yay!
Talk a little bit about that. Yeah, how cool is that, right?
It's so good. It's so good. I want us all to do so well. And, you know, I think there's more of that desire out there than we are led to believe, because, you know, the urge for cooperation and kindness and compassion doesn't make for a very interesting story, right? Because it's not dramatic. And you know, I'm enough of a writer and a novelist to know that conflict is at the base of entertainment, right? So, you know, if you want to sell something or you want to make a story that's captivating to people, you have to sell a certain kind of conflict. And I feel like, in a way, the women's movement got sort of hijacked by a story about the disagreements and the arguments and the bitterness and the rancor that might exist between women, and then just neglected to tell the story of the sisterhood and the fellowship and the encouragement and the love and the companionship and the support that exists between women, because it's not as interesting.
Right.
You know, I happen to think it's really interesting. You know, there's a story I always think about. My sister was babysitting. She's a mom, and she was babysitting neighbors' kids one day in the winter. And my sister's really crafty and really good at sort of making stuff and really artistic. And so she set the girls up to make these amazing, elaborate gingerbread houses that my sister sort of supervised, but the girls basically did themselves, and it took them all day, and they were glorious. And when the young girl's mother came to pick her up at the end of the day and saw the gingerbread house, she burst into tears. And she said to my sister, "You're such a better mother than I am." And my sister just took her in her arms, and these two women barely knew each other, right? They were just sort of friendly neighbors, and said, "Let's not do that to each other." What do you say? Let's not do that to each other, okay? You didn't hear the yelling last night that was going on in this house when I was trying to get my daughter to go to bed. Like, let's just not do that. You know, and I feel like more and more I'm seeing women who are saying that to each other, whether it's implicitly or explicitly. Let's just not do this. You know, it's hard enough out there on women if we're not turning on each other and on ourselves. So let's be a little compassionate about how difficult a job we're all trying to do, and give each other some grace and some room. And I think there's a lot of space for that. It's just not something that the media will cover because it's boring. Love and compassion are boring. You know, conflict and disagreement are interesting. So, but I'm interested in love and compassion, so I foster it where I can.
Yeah, well, I think more and more people are finding out that while the conflict story might be more interesting in the short run, love and compassion are far more satisfying in the long run. And it's so interesting, our Chopra Center audience and the global community that we're creating, and the people that are coming to our events are coming, and we hear this all the time, because they want to connect with other like-minded people who are also wanting to support each other, embrace each other, bolster each other up. So it's almost like a new movement that we're in here.
It's great, and it's such a good use of this moment in history where you can connect with the entire world. And I've had people say to me, like, sort of really big questions like, "Do you think social media is good or bad?" And I'm like, that's like asking if money is good or bad, or the sun is good or bad. There is no intrinsic morality there. It's a neutral energy source, a very powerful but morally neutral energy source. It is what you do with it, right? Like, money can be amazing and do incredible things, and the sun can generate amazing power or give you skin cancer, but it doesn't have a morality, And social media is what you put in it. And I've developed that community on Facebook that, like, I just love them so much, and we talk about, we're playful and we're goofy on there too, and we share cat videos, but we also talk about these questions. And I'm amazed, and I don't know why I should be, but I'm amazed every day at the number of people who show up there ready to have a sincere conversation about something of meaning, and where they're writing from Indonesia, from Saudi Arabia, from Latin America, from the middle of my country, and chiming in and helping each other and giving advice. Today, on my Facebook page, we're talking about how to get over a broken heart, and people are sharing their own experiences with such candor and vulnerability. And I just think, this is amazing. This never could have happened before. It's wonderful.
Right. Your Facebook community really is something special. And I definitely invite anybody who hasn't wandered over that page to do so, because there's just so much goodness and juiciness there.
Everyone is so sweet.
They really are. They really are. And wanting to connect and to be authentic and to be true and to be bold and, to be all of these things that you are, and that people have, looked to you from, starting with those early books and just continuing on. And, looking at your life and your work, I can't help but think that there's some profound connection between authenticity and creativity, especially for women. Do you think that there's a connection there?
Oh, my goodness, yes, and thank you for bringing that up. One of the things that I say in Big Magic in the new book is that, it's one of the reasons that I see people not being creative is because they don't think they're original. They don't, either because they don't feel like they have the proper education or training to do this kind of creativity that they're interested in, or even if they did go out and learn, they feel like they don't have anything to say that's original, that everything has already been said, everything has already been done. Any book they want to write has already been written better by somebody else. Any painting they want to do, there's 10 people who can do it better. They're just locked in this sense of their own lack of value because they're not original. And the thing that I'm always saying to people is, I don't care about originality at all. I just care about authenticity because, if anything, actually, I think sometimes I've been exposed to pieces of art or books that are, incredibly original and incredibly brilliant, but there's no soul in it. I don't know who the person is who wrote it. They're just showing me how dazzling they are with language, or they're showing me, what a gifted artist they are, but they're not showing me who they are. And I always say, forget about originality. It's too late anyway. Everything has been done. By the time Shakespeare was finished with his run on life, he'd covered every storyline that there is, and they were already cliches by the time he got to them. When Picasso saw the cave paintings, they took him on a tour of the ancient cave paintings in the caves of France, and he said, "We haven't learned anything about art in 10,000 years." Actually, it was more like 20, but anyway, he was right. There isn't anything new to be done. Humans will constantly be recycling the same questions and the same stories and the same feelings because we're all related, and that's okay. The point is not for you to do something that's never been done before. The point is for you to do something you've never done before. And by doing that, it becomes original. I always say to people, if your work and your creativity are authentic enough, trust me, it will feel original. It will feel new. It just show me who you are. That's all I want to know. That's all any of us want to see in each other.
That's powerful. And that process of creation, that could be called empowerment right there.
It's totally, because what you're doing is something that the poet David White, who you may know of, he's a fantastic British poet. He speaks about this urge that he calls the arrogance of belonging, and he says that there's no way you can possibly live a creative life until you've tapped into what he refers to as the arrogance of belonging. And the arrogance of belonging is an arrogance that makes you stand up on your 2 feet and say, I am here, and I exist, and I have a right to a voice, and I have a right to expression. And it's a really hard thing for women to do because, for most of history, women have been instructed very clearly not to do that. You are to be seen and not heard, and maybe not even seen, and so it's a kind of entitlement that you have to step into. And that's a really hard word for people because people want to be humble and they want to be modest and they don't want to take up more space than they deserve. And who am I to say that I have a right to blah, blah, blah? There's this meekness. But what David White is talking about when he talks about the arrogance of belonging, it's not narcissism. It doesn't say I'm the greatest. It just says I am. And I am a product of creation just like everyone else. I was created, and therefore I have a right to create. My presence here is not an accident. My existence in this universe is by design. I want to interact with that. I want to express myself in that while I'm here. I was given consciousness for some kind of reason. I want to play with that. I want to explore it. I want to show you the inside of me as I'm fascinated by seeing the inside of you. I am here too. I am also a child of God. And I think that, part of the reason that we don't see women's voices and women's visions as much as I would like to in the arts, some of that is because of being excluded and some of that is because of misogyny and discrimination, but a lot of it is women just not even making the work because they haven't been able to foster that arrogance of belonging. And that's something that I hope to shake up in people as much as I can.
Absolutely. It seems so many of us take ourselves out of the game before we even give it a try. We talk ourselves out of the creative work before it's even begun.
that's the ultimate victimization of perfectionism, is that we think of perfectionism as something, sometimes we think of it as a virtue, unfortunately, although I don't. But people in job interviews will often, advertise it. Like,
right.
Oh, I'm just too much of a perfectionist. But perfectionism is the death of all good and all fun and all spontaneity. Perfectionism often stops people from completing their work because they get so discouraged with it that they lay down their tools and surrender. But the very worst crime of perfectionism is when it stops you from even beginning, because you pre-decide that it's not going to be good enough, and so you don't even do it. And then you are sort of excluding yourself from the great wonder and mystery and fun and joy of creativity, no matter what its outcome.
Now, you knew that you were going to be a writer, and that was your calling, and you were called to write from a very young age. So I imagine that your own creative process was probably difficult and challenging, as all artist processes are, but you knew what road you wanted to travel. What would you say to people listening who want to be creative, they want to be generative and to create works of some kind, but don't feel that pull in one direction or another and don't know what they want to do?
I would say, first of all, you should forget about freaks like me, because it is bizarre to know by the age of 7 what you want to be in your life. And it is not, it is weird. I happen to have been that kind of person. I know a few people who are like that. We're weirdos, we're freaks, and we're aberrations, because it's not typical. And, most of the people who I know who do really beautiful work were spending their 7th year very happily, like playing with dolls and not thinking about their future artistic career. You know what I mean? So you don't have to come at it from that way. Just to be very clear. And I think there are 2 pathways to a life of creativity, and one is the pathway of the clear and burning passion, which is what I've had. Like, I have the tower of flame in the desert that says this is what you're going to be, I get irritated sometimes when I hear people tell other people to follow their passion, because I feel like it's sometimes not a necessary thing to say, because if someone has one, they're already doing it. Like, that's the definition of a passion. You have no choice. You're already in it, so don't worry about those people. They're weird and they're fine, and that's not the problem. The problem is the others, as you said. And sometimes I think when they see people who are driven by passion, they think, oh, that's not me, so I can't participate in that, and that is not at all true, because the second path, which can produce just as remarkable work and just as amazingly actualized lives, is the path of curiosity. And curiosity is a much more mild and democratic and inviting and welcoming and gentle urge than passion. Passion makes you get divorced and shave your head and move to Nepal. And curiosity is like, I'm not going to make you do that. You don't have to do that. Totally don't have to do that. But what curiosity does is it just asks you a series of very gentle questions throughout your life. And the curiosity is always asking you, is there anything you're a little bit interested in today? A little? Like anything that makes you want to turn your head a quarter of an inch and look a tiny bit closer at it. Anything, no matter how random. And the way to live a curiosity-driven life is to obey that and to answer it and say, yeah, I'm kind of a little tiny bit interested in this thing. The stakes are so low. It may be nothing. You can turn your head and look at it a quarter of an inch closer and be like, yeah, actually, no, I'm not that interested in it, and drop it, and nothing's been lost. Or you can discover that it was a clue on the scavenger hunt toward a more creative and expansive life. And then you look for the next little clue, and the next, and the next, and the next. And it can be the case that by spending a lifetime following curiosity, nothing ever comes of it. That at the end of your life, you still haven't discovered your one great burning passion. And then all you did for your whole life was live an existence based on intellectual inquisitiveness that you kept alive for your entire life. And you have this crazy quotable life to look back on all these amazing things that you were interested in, that you pursued, and that you found out about. And that should be enough for anybody to say that they lived a fully actualized and fascinating human existence. So I always defend curiosity against the tyranny of passion and would suggest that people just give themselves permission to start on that scavenger hunt as soon as possible.
Are there other tools that you want to share, just small things that listeners could put into place today that could help them to start to turn towards that curiosity and away from fear and doubt and those sort of rules that define most of our lives every day?
I think the main thing for me is that I've built my entire creative life on this piece of magical thinking. And that magical thinking goes like this. The work wants to be made, and it wants to be made through me. And that takes the creative experience and turns it into a relationship. Because the way I see it is that the world is full of ideas, and ideas are separate things from us. They come from some other realm. We don't know where. They circle the earth constantly looking for human collaborators, looking for somebody that they can engage with in order to become manifest. The only way an idea can be made manifest is through cooperation with a human being's labor. So we provide the labor, the idea provides the inspiration, and together the two of you make something that's never been made before. And we're the only species on Earth that can do that, so we have this special extra thing, this special extra consciousness where inspiration can interact with us at that level. And my magical thinking that I choose to build my entire life on is that inspiration delights in working with us, delights in it, and constantly is coming around you and swirling around you and saying, are you my mother? Are you my mother? Are you my mother? Do you want to work with me? Do you want to work with me? And mostly we say no. Out of fear, out of busyness, out of insecurity, all the reasons that we walk around our lives saying no. But every once in a while you get open enough to actually say yes, and then that idea delights in your yes. And then you're in a relationship with this thing, with this mystical, strange, slippery, hard to understand concept that wants to work with you. And so whenever I'm working and it's not going well, which is most of the time because it's a hard thing to do creativity, instead of doing this sort of German romantic anguish, suffering, tearing at my hair, howling at my despair, I just sit there at my desk and I talk to inspiration and I say, look, I know you're trying to show me this and help me puzzle through this, and I'm not going to give up on you if you don't give up on me. And it's this great leap of faith, but it's also this great leap of friendship, for lack of a better word, this idea of making friends with inspiration. And my experience has been that if you're friendly with it, it's friendly with you. It's so happy to have somebody to talk to. And if it's not going well, it isn't because inspiration's trying to torment you or mess with your head. It's just because it comes from a different place and it doesn't quite speak our language, and we don't, we're still working out this relationship, but what a privilege to get to engage with it at all.
Liz, is your work your spiritual practice?
Definitely. It's certainly my most consistent practice of anything. I would love to tell you that I meditate every day. I would love to tell you that I do yoga every day. I would love to tell you that I am in prayer and contemplation all the time, but I'm in fact not. I've gone through many stages in my life where I try to kind of develop those practices, and sometimes I keep them for a while and then they kind of drop off because they don't hold me in the same way that artistic creativity does. And so maybe that's why I've embodied creativity with this divine aspect, because all the things that I've always been taught that meditation will do for you and prayer will do for you, and wisdom contemplation will do for you, I get out of creativity. That sense of time stopping, that sense of being in communion with something larger than yourself, that sense of purpose, that sense of stopping the sort of frailty and scariness of a mortal life and entering into something eternal, that sense that the outcome doesn't matter, it's just the process that matters. All of those things come to me in my work. And I think that whatever you can find in your life that brings you to that place, that's your divinity. And it might not look like anybody else's. It might not look like church. It might not look like an ashram, and that might be parenthood for you. It might be exercise for you. It might be service. There's all sorts of ways that people can access that sense of being in communion with the divine. But for me, it happens to be through creative work, which is what I call the big magic, and why I'm so happy to be able to talk about this.
Yes. Well, Liz Gilbert, Big Magic is coming out in September, and we are so excited to have you join us this May at Spiritual Solutions for Women. Thank you. It's just been a pleasure.
Thank you, sweetheart. I can't wait to be there. It's going to be awesome.
We can't wait to have you. May can't come soon enough.
Thanks. You have a great day.
You too. Take care. If you'd like to learn more about Big Magic and creating a life you love with Liz Gilbert, Deepak Chopra, and Joan Borisenko, we invite you to join us at Spiritual Solutions for Women, May 28th through 31st at the Chopra Center in Carlsbad, California. You can learn more at chopra.com/spiritual solutions or by calling us at 760-494-1639. Thanks so much and be well.